everyone. I'm going to start off souls by giving all praise to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushua, Ba'ashem Kwakwadash. Double honors to the apostles of great Millstone, and honors to brothers doing the work of the Most High in truth and in sincerity. Yahweh is the real name of whom the world ignorantly calls God, Jehovah or Yahweh. His real name is Yahweh. The son's true name is Yahweh Shai, and when we pray Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua, Ba meaning in, Ha meaning the, and Sham meaning names, Yahweh. In the name of Yahweh Shai. This is a quick one based off of transliteration versus translation, and those kind of concepts. So a bit on transliteration, a bit on translation, and basically how those two things affect the scriptures, or rather people's modern interpretation of the scriptures. Believe I was watching a video, forget which one now, which basically inspired me to go into this, but also just as a thing of, the Spirit has it whereby I go into languages and stuff like that. And one of the things you do see, especially in media, is how language doesn't, a translation doesn't necessarily, spoken word in subtitles doesn't necessarily get translated into what was said. There's a lot of context that gets taken out when translated, and we're going to get that in the prologue of Sirach later on. But then also in transliteration, where you can have something that looks a certain way in the English, but in the native tongue it's pronounced completely differently, right? So this is from Family Tree. I just looked up online, difference between transliteration and translation, right? Because there is quite a difference, right? So a translation tells you the meaning of words in another language, right? Just like how we'll say, we'll get into that word later on, but as an example, cosmos or aeon, basically being translated as world, right, in the English, right? But in those two different separate words, right, in the translation into the English to just mean kind of like world, right, is what we would is exactly the one of the problems, right? Just trying to highlight in this lesson, right? And is highlighted in the scriptures already, right? It says a transliteration, on the other hand, doesn't tell you the meaning of the words, but it helps you pronounce them. But even then, the point as well that I'm trying to make is that those transliterations can be completely wrong. Right. And I see this a lot with Korean, where basically you'll basically have, I find it absolutely impossible to read transliterated Korean. It's like, what the hell are they trying to say there, right? Because for instance, your mouth will want to do, for instance, they've got like a o sound which is spelled EO, so your mouth wants to do EO, right, as opposed to what the language actually wants you to say, which is O. And then certain things about how people's pronunciation is in general, right, how certain times the transliteration will be an S, but when pronounced, just because of the way the language works, pronounced as a sh. Certain times it's pronounced as a t, all dependent on the rules, right? And that's just a thing about transliteration. Now, of course, we know where we're gonna end up here with this, concepts of transliterations. Right, it says transliteration changes the letters from one alphabet or language into the corresponding similar sounding characters of another alphabet. Right, so then we ask the question, when did, they say Yeshua, right, but we understand his, the son of the Most High, his name is Yahweh Shai, right? But so when did Yahweh Shai become Jesus in Christian history, right? And what you call it, it's an interesting breakdown, and also kind of cover some of the other names that we see in the King James version, in the books called the New Testament, right? But it says there is no Y, sh, or U sound in the Greek alphabet, right? By the time of Yahweh Shai, the Greek U was pronounced as a front rounded vowel, like the French. I don't know what the French would be. It says these sounds were thus represented in Greek as follows, right? Because you're basically saying these are the languages that I have to work for, I have to work with. Therefore, this is how I'm going to, transliterate it into my language. Just like how, for instance, and we all know the joke about how East Asians can't really, they struggle to say the r sound, the R sound, right? So then when you ask an East Persian person to say lorry, right, they get completely confused. They'll be like rolly, lol-ri, because it's not sounds that are native to their alphabet. Same with like Koreans can't really say z because it's not a sound that's native to their alphabet. So when you may ask, what do you call it, a Korean, what is the name of a place where you've got lots of animal? We would say zoo, they would say ju, right? They can try and say zoo, but it's not natural, right? So it's saying this: there is no Y, sh, or U in the Greek alphabet. By the time of Yahushua, the Greek U was pronounced. Yeah, so I read that. It says Y equals I. I've written J in English when pronounced with a Y sound. Sh equals S, and U written simply as U in English, right? So when the name Yahushua is spelled phonetically in Greek alphabet, it becomes Yeshua or Jeshua or Yeshua in the English transliteration. So in fact, this is very interesting. So it says I written J in English when pronounced with a Y sound, right? I'd need to look into that a little bit more, right? But it says in the English translation, however, Greek is also an inflected language, and suffixes are used to denote the function of a noun in the sentence. The most common masculine suffix in ancient Greek when denoting the subject of a sentence is os. When the Jews themselves used the name Yahushai as the subject of a sentence in Greek language text, they spelt it Yesuos, which usually contracted to Yesuos, or I mean they say Jesus, right, in English. Right, it says this convention did not start with the New Testament. The Jews were using Jesus in place of Yahushua in Greek texts at least 2 centuries before the birth of Yahushua Mashiach. Right, it says Yawasap, Joseph, has a similar story. It is normally transliterated directly into Greek as Yosef or Joseph in English. The declinable form used with suffixes is Yossis, Josies in English, right? One of the brothers or cousins of scripture says, one sec, so if you just bear with me. Salakia. Where are we here? Right, this is Mark 6:3. Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James and Joses, right, and Judah and Simon, and are not his sisters here with us? And they were offended at him, right? So we continue on. So it says it's called Joses in the New Testament. That is actually the name of Yahusap in the Greek nominative case. Right, we see several cases of this in the Greek translation of the Old Testament: Abraham, Abram, Jacob, Judah, Judas, Maria, Mary, which as Isaiah and Isaiah, right? And you see that in the in the New Testament. Let me just get the verse as an example. Somewhere on the screen. Was it Isaiah? New Testament. Can't find the verse that I'm thinking of. But yeah, continue on. Right, so I asked the robot, right, similar question, right, about basically how the word, how Yahushua effectively became Jesus, right? So it says Hebrew to Greek. So it says Jesus is a transliteration of the Greek name Jesus, which itself is a transliteration of, once again, we know his real name to be Yahushua. Right, here's a breakdown of the process. So when you're saying, that word Jesus, it's like a, third way, twice removed, I think it is, right? And the apostles, elders, Archeum, have long, several times we go into base how that Jesus don't mean anything. Okay, it says Hebrew to Greek says the name Yeshua, which is Joshua in English, right, which was translated into Greek Jesus, because Greek and Hebrew have different alphabet and sounds. The name was adapted to fit Greek phonetics, right? So there's also a lot of changing that happens when you're basically doing this, right? It says Greek to Latin. It says the Greek Jesus was then transliterated into Latin as Jesus. Latin, like Greek, does not have a sh sound, so the name continued to evolve phonetically. So Latin to English, the Latin Jesus was eventually transliterated into English as Jesus. The J sound in English developed over time, right? So really you could argue that this is a 3 times removed, right? Because there is the original English, right? And then there is this very modern English that we're speaking where you do have a J sound, right? And a V sound as well, okay? So you could really argue this is 3 times removed, i.e. from Yahushai to Jesus to, rather, what did they say? From Yahushai to Jesus, what did you say? Yes, from Yahushua to Jesus to Jesus, and then from G to Jesus. So 3 different what do you call it, changes, right? Whereas we just go back to the Hebrew. Just go back to the Hebrew. Why are you using a name that's been changed so many different times, right? Because that doesn't even come in the spirit of the Lord. Lord said he doesn't change, right? So why are you using a changed up name, right? But we continue, right? It's Proverbs 30:4 says, "Who hath ascended up into heaven, or descended? Who hath gathered the wind in his fists? Who has bound the waters in a garment? Who hath established all the ends of the earth? What is his name, and what is his son's name, if thou canst tell?" Right? And we know it's not going to be a name that's been changed so many different times, right? We're going to go back to the original, right? Which is Yahweh Shai, right? And once again, that is something that we must profess into the world, because according to the precepts, right, it says Acts 4:12 says, "Neither is there salvation in any other, for there is none other name under heaven given among men whereby we must be saved," right? And that's it. So that's it on transliteration, right? So now let's touch on translation, right? So we're going to start off with the prologue of Sirach, right? So it says, "Wherefore," I'm going to jump down to here. It says, "Wherefore let me entreat you to read it with favor and attention, and to pardon us wherein we may seem to come short of some words which we have labored to interpret," right? If you have any people that that basically, and that even Akim, that are native to another tongue, all right, or as growing up they spoke another language, right? You'll always hear this thing, be busting a joke. Yeah, I can't really say it in English. Doesn't really, I can't really say it in English. We've all experienced that. Okay. It says, "For the same things uttered in Hebrew, right, and translated into another tongue have not the same force in them. And not only these things, but the law itself and the prophets and the rest of the books have no small difference when they are spoken in their own language," right? And once again, that's something that you see in very critical parts of the scriptures, which these Christians will misuse, right? Because the scriptures are plain, especially when you look into the Hebrew and you look into the Greek. The scriptures are plain as to what it is that they're talking about, right? It's just that people want to make the scriptures fit their own narrative, right? But then also it is something, once again, as Spirit has me going into these languages and stuff. It's when you're watching like television and certain words, you start picking up that actually what you're reading on screen as subtitles is not what is being said, right? And you start losing a lot of context in translations, right? So I looked up what are the common challenges of translating subtitles for film and TV shows, right? And which one of them is cultural reference. One of the most difficult aspects of subtitling is dealing with cultural references such as idioms, jokes, slang, names, places, or historical events, right? So there are certain things that we don't necessarily have, right? Let's say in when we're reading something in English, right? And especially considering the fact that we're in a completely different world, if you will, as compared to what the scriptures were written in, as an example, right? So I looked up calling someone a fox, right? So calling someone a fox in antiquity would not necessarily imply that that person is sly, which is what would happen in the modern world. If you know someone say it's a bit of a fox, that's kind of what it implies, right? But it says instead it could portray the person as worthless, slanderous, or treacherous, or often cunning in an unprincipled manner, right? So then let's say that was to happen today, and you was to translate that today into today's English. You may use a word like, the only word I can really think of, right? Not PG, but that ass hero, that asshole, man, right? Because that is something that we understand in today's English, whereas in the in Yahweh Shai's time, calling someone a fox was something that was understood, right? But once again, we are what do you call it? We are basically limited, right, by the language that we're using, right? And an example, like I said, that I see as well, right, is you get certain words, right? For instance, this word here in the Korean, for example, is nuna, right, which is just translated simply as sister, right? But when you look at that word in the translation, you're missing a load of context, right, in what this particular word means, right? Because once again, in the English, you're just saying sister, right? But in the language itself, it's saying a lot more. And once again, we see this in key parts of the scriptures, right? For example, in John 3, that we're going to get shortly, right, where basically you realize, or actually there's a lot of hidden context in the fact that we've translated it into English, much like how we see here when it says, would you call it, for the same things and translated into another tongue have not the same force in them, right? Because when you really look into that word, it's actually an elder sister, right? And more specifically, it's a word used by a male to refer to or address his female siblings or cousins older than himself, right? So when you see that translated as sister, you're just going to be like, it's just a sister, isn't it? But the language itself is very explicit in what is being spoken about, right? And you can also use that. It's also used for like your missus as well. Now they did do a much better job of translating this, right? Your dong sang, which is like younger sister, right? But then even when you look at the, like, once again, the transliteration is, it's a bit shit. You look, it says Yodong sang, but you may read it as Yodong sang, right? You just read it hella weird, right? But then I'll leave this one because I was gonna touch ever so slightly. I'll touch on it real quick, right? This is just something as well in terms of like pronunciation of certain things and certain key things. Not key, but pronunciation. Right, is this thing called IPA, International Phonetic Alphabet. Right, so you look at a name like Antiochus. That's kind of like how we've always kind of said it, right? But this actually tells you exactly how to pronounce it. Once again, for this reason, where when you're looking at something that has been transliterated, you're going to pronounce it in the kind of way that you pronounce it, right? However, when you've got what you call an IPA, right, it kind of tells you really it should be said more like this, right? So really, it should actually be Antiochus, right? So typed it is IPA-reader.xyz, right?
Antiochus.
So as you see, that's really how it should be pronounced, right? So I'm just gonna get to two more. What have I got here now? So this is John 3, right? As one of the key scriptures that basically gets abused in terms of translation, right? Because there's a lot of hidden context within this word here, word. And in fact, I'm just gonna load up as well, John 17:9, right? This is John 3. I'm going to start from 14, right? Because once again, when I was preparing the lesson, you kind of look at 14, you're just like, actually, it's kind of telling you what we're about to read, right? So it says, and as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up, right? And you see here that this is quoting Numbers 21:7-9. Oh, what have I done? Okay. So it says, therefore, Numbers 21 from 7. It says, therefore, the people came to Moses and said, we have sinned, for we have spoken against Yahweh and against thee. Pray unto Yahweh that he take away the serpent from us. And Moses prayed for the people, right? And what people was this? What people was this? Right, it says, and Yahweh said unto Moses, make thee a fiery serpent, right, and set it upon a pole, and it shall come to pass that everyone that is bitten, when he looketh upon it, shall live, right? And this once again is representation of Yahweh Shai, right? So we've just read this, right? This is, when this was a representation of Yahweh Shai. Right, so then we carry on, right? In verse 15, it says that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have eternal life. But what example have we just been given, right? And who was that example? That particular story was to the Israelites, right? So it says, for the Most High so loved the world, right, that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. Right, and once again, this word here, world, goes back to the Greek cosmos, right? Right, this is an orderly arrangement, a decoration, by implication, the world, right? But really, it's going into this as an apt and harmonious arrangement or constitution, order, government, right? So basically, it's going into a specific group of people, right? Particular, a sect, right? SECT, right? And once again, the clues start, which, there may be more clues further up, right? But when, what you call it? So like there may be more clues further up, but this, just from close proximity, 3:14 is a clue, right? But when you look at John 3:16 itself, that is a quote of a precept, right? It says Joel 2:32, right? And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of Yahweh shall be delivered. And in fact, we can actually pause there, right? Because when you read Malachi 1:14, right, it says this, but cursed be the deceiver which hath in his flock a male, and voweth and sacrificeth unto the Lord a corrupt thing, right? For I am a great king, saith Yahweh of hosts, and my name is dreadful among the heathen. Okay, so this in itself, once again, you go from John 3, got there in the end, John 3:16, right? But yeah, it says that whosoever believed in him should not perish but have everlasting life. This John 3:16 is quoted in Joel 2:32, right, which starts off by saying whosoever shall call on the name of Yahweh. But when you read Malachi 1:14, it says that my name is dreadful among the heathen. So who can call on the name of Yahweh? An Israelite. Okay. So it says, for in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem shall be deliverance, as Yahweh said, in the remnant, and in the remnant whom Yahweh shall call, right? So that's almost it. So we can touch on this real quick. This is John 17:9. It says, I pray for them, I pray not for the world, but for them which thou hast given me, for they are thine, right? But in even here, the word for world is Greek, is cosmos, right? Because there is an Israel of God, and then there's an Israel, there's an Israel, and then there's the Israel of God, right? And Yahushua was praying for the elect, right? The Israel of God, being the elect. Because when you read Romans 9:6, this is what we read. It says, not as though the word of the Most High hath taken none effect, for they are not all Israel which are of Israel. Right. So as always, Lord's will, that was edifying. Those all which kind of kept with me there. Point I was trying to make. But yeah, transliteration, translation, and the issues that you have. Hopefully, been able to highlight. Just the situation that you end up. But we all know. We understand through the spirit and power of Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai. That when that the Lord's name isn't Jesus, it ain't Jesus, right? That it's Yahweh Shai, right? And we also understand when the scriptures is may in the English may appear to be speaking about salvation for everyone, that actually that's not the case, and that in certain instances the certain words that have been used in the English right? Basically hide the meaning. But the Lord did that as a stumbling block for those that ain't meant to get it. But through the Spirit, we get it. We understand when we read John 3:16 that this is talking about Israel, right? Did a video not too long ago, I believe, which was, something to the effect of, what is understood doesn't need to be explained. Okay? What is understood doesn't need to be explained, right? And these scriptures were sent to the Israelites, right? So as always, Lord's all that was edifying. Until the next time we say Shalom.